your 2024 Hot Rod Ultra overall champion, Miss Abby Murphy. She is in the house, folks. Can you believe it? We've got her sitting here in the flesh. What a great day. What a great day to be here and be live on the podcast. And Abby, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, excited to talk and take it back to a month ago and think back to all of the Hot Rod Ultra memories. It'll be exciting.
Yeah, well, we've got a bunch of them for sure. And we were talking offline a little bit before we started, and in my head, I'm like, okay, I got to stop. Like, we're spitting out such good conversation right now. We need to save it for whenever we go live. So, how's it going, Abby?
It's going good. Life post training has been wonderful. I love training too, but kind of rewiring my brain to be like, okay, fitness is now just a leisurely thing. You don't have to train for anything. If you wake up in the morning and you want to sleep an extra hour, like, you can do that now. It's okay. So it's been like simultaneously challenging, but also wonderful. It also helps because I don't know if my fiance is watching this or not, but I am engaged.
You spoiled it. That was my next question. I was like, oh, no. I was going to say, let's start with some big news. Yeah. I was going to have you flash the ring so you can flash the ring.
Ring. It's my grandma's ring. Same band, same diamond, like everything. But it's crazy because so we went straight from the end of the Ultra. The day the Ultra, that Sunday that it ended, we drove to the beach, which was like a very painful car ride.
Was it just you two driving as well?
And my mom drove us.
Oh, okay.
So we slept
still
the
tough.
whole way.
Yeah.
And then we got to the beach that morning and we were out for like 3 days.
Gosh, I can only imagine.
And then he proposed on Friday. So it was like not even a week.
Yeah.
It was a crazy turnaround, but I got back and I would hear like, congratulations from different groups of people. And I'd be like, for what?
Which one?
I was like, I don't know.
Like, not to flex, but which congratulations are you referring to?
And I'm very, very grateful that just some awesome things happened all in the span of a week. But, I'd go to like workout classes or something and they'd be like, hey, congratulations. And I'd be like, thank you. And they'd be like, you ran a lot. And I was like, thank you. I didn't want to be like, so awesome.
But also the ring.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, it's the craziest feeling whenever, my wife and I have been married for, we just hit 3 years in June. And I remember whenever we first got engaged, it's the weirdest thing to start referring to them as fiance.
Yes.
And
oh my gosh.
It's so odd. And then going from fiance to wife, it's the same thing. I'm like, how am I ever going to get used to this?
Yeah.
So how is it? It's so exciting, obviously, but what did it feel like to go, like, you pretty much went from this high of winning the Hot Rod Ultra, and then also, like, aside from that, you crushed your PR in terms of most miles you ever ran, and then you hit your goal of 100 miles like you set, and then you go from that, you go to the beach, you're just chilling, and then you get engaged. So what did that feel like? Just like a rush of emotions? Like, walk me through that.
It was crazy. I mean, none of it would have been possible without the Lord, and 100%. I truly mean that. I mean, yes, I put in the training, I did my time, I dedicated practically every single day to training for this race. And honestly, in dating, like, you're training for marriage. So, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. Like, I wouldn't date Ryan if, I couldn't see him being a potential partner. And then once we kind of made that decision of like, okay, we want to spend the rest of our lives together, that's when I was like just always anticipating it. So I feel like I had a lot of buildup to the proposal of hope. Just as I had a lot of buildup with the race. But when that week happened of like the lead up to the race and then the lead up to the proposal, I was completely unaware of the outcome of both. Like,
that's awesome.
I was very expectant of, what limits I would hit and how I could go past those in the race. And I kind of just went in with a hope to hit 100 miles. But I didn't really have a certain number goal that I was like, I need to hit this because, again, I run for the Lord. I don't run for personal gain. I don't run for accomplishing success in the world's eyes. I just run because that's my ministry and I love it. And, the Lord was so good in blessing me with being able to run over that goal, which is awesome. And I'm so grateful. And then going from that to a proposal that I had no idea was coming was just like, whoa, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But if I'm being quite honest, which I guess this is a good thing because hopefully I have my priorities straight just a little bit. But once I was engaged, that's all my brain thought about. I was like, forget about this race. I'm going to spend the rest of my life with the love of my life. And, you know, our goal in that marriage is to honor the Lord as well. And so I'm just really excited to see, you know, what the future holds. But that span of a week was incredible for so many reasons. But the main reason was because my God is good.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I mean, yeah, I remember seeing that after the ultra kind of ended, you know, we're coming off this high too, putting this race on. It's like you see all these people come out and they have such an amazing time. And we have these expectations of, oh, this person is going to do so good and this person, that, you know, whatever. And then when you see people in the element of an ultra marathon, I mean, this was your first one, right? And so it's so unexpected. Like there's so much uncertainty whenever you go and run a race like this because you don't know what you're physically, mentally capable of until you get out there and you just do it. And so that's why, you know, when I kind of did the, lack of better word, storybook route to running my first 100-mile race. I did a 50K, then I did a 50-miler, I did a last man standing, and then I did a 100-mile race. And so I kind of was able to gauge my limits, if you want to call them my limitations, up to the point of my 100-mile race where I was like, okay, cross the 50K off, cross the 50-mile off, cross the 100-mile off. But when you go from, what was your longest run before the ultra? A marathon. So when you go from 26 miles to 100 miles, there's a lot that can happen between that, right?
Right.
So when you made the comment of, you know, I had this goal of 100 miles, but I was just going to go in kind of open-minded. Isn't that such a scary feeling? You know, I remember having a conversation with your dad around, I don't know. I don't even know what time. I have no clue. Maybe 4 a.m., 3 a.m.
It all started blurring
together.
together.
It all kind of blends together. And I was talking to your dad and I was like, what's Abby's goal? You know, she's leading right now. He was like, well, she set a goal, but she didn't really like tell a lot of people. I was like, oh, that's fine. In my head, I'm like, probably 100 miles.
Yeah.
But it's really scary because in your head, you're like, I want to do this so bad. And no matter what the reasoning is, like, I want to do this so bad, but it's also really, really scary because I don't know if I can do that.
Right.
So what did that feel like leading up to the race? Like, I want to do 100 miles, but I don't know how it's going to go. What were you feeling? Like, how did that feel?
Right. I was terrified, if I'm being quite honest. I was terrified and so excited as well. There was a lot in my head and a lot that I was going through physically during that time. Like, honestly, my main fear, which I feel like a lot of runners can relate to this. I know a lot of female runners can, just because I am a female and kind of have talked about that with other female runners. But like, I was trying to put on weight at the time, and this was the heaviest I've ever been for a race. And I felt really self-conscious about just my body. And that was something that was scary because I'm used to running lighter. And that was like an added level of self-consciousness and just like, I don't know how to race being X amount heavier. And so that was something that I just had to be like, you are not defined by how you look, your size. The extra weight is only going to push you forward. You are training to run a lot of miles. You need every extra ounce of food that you can get. And so it's just kind of replacing those lies in my head of like, no. This is what's right. This is true. This is the foundation. And it's a lot of back and forth with those doubts in the training as well. And being like, literally the most I've ever run is 26.2. So I know once I hit 26.3, it's uncharted territory. Yeah. From there, Jesus, take the wheel. And I don't want to come on here and be like, I don't ever want anything I say to be like misinterpreted as like, oh, she's just trying to brand Jesus or this, that, and the other. But I truly mean it with my entire heart. I could not have done it without the Lord. Like, I was running that race and I'm like, with every step, Jesus is running with me. And that is honestly what kept me going until the very end. But I do know that I am a psycho and I will run until I walk until I crawl, and crawl until I'm passed out. And telling that to my parents is kind of hard because they're like, our little baby, we don't want her to push her past her limits. But there's just a certain level of like, you have to just take the next step. And I think the key to not getting overwhelmed with what's going to happen, I've put in all of this effort, is embracing that fear and being like, I'm going to focus on the mile that I'm in right now, which is why I loved that it was on a loop, because I could only focus on that 0.3 loop. Each time I would go, and I would reevaluate every loop and be like, okay, I'm going to run another loop. I'm going to run another loop. And I did that for a while. Then I would walk and then run and walk. And it kind of takes the focus off of the huge long picture and keeps you very present right where you're at in the moment. And then before I knew it, I was running through smoke because I hit 100 miles and I was like, wait, what? And then it was, okay, on to the next.
Yeah, I think that's what's been really helpful for me. One thing I always try to do whenever I run a race now is I just try to turn my brain off. And it's easier said than done, obviously, but whenever I do 100-mile races specifically, if I can turn my brain off for the first 40 miles, I'm good. Because it's not that by any means you don't want to avoid like the highs and the lows, because that just comes and goes. But to try to mitigate the highs and lows for as long as possible, I found is the best for me, because when you can stay neutral, when you can just kind of go through the motions for a little bit, when you're running for 20 to 30 hours, depending on what race you're doing, that's a long time. That's a full day. And so being in constant motion for that amount of time, you have to find ways to mitigate what your mind's going to go through. Right.
Yeah.
But something interesting that you said about, you say you don't really want to brand like you as like Jesus does everything or whatever you said. But at the same time, that applies to every area of your life, right? Like I've always, it was like this past January of this year, or December of 2023, I had a very big spiritual awakening. I've always believed in God, but I really, at that point, I was like, I want to know who Jesus is. Like, I want to know who Jesus is, what his life looked like, and what he did for me. Like, why do people love this guy so much? And I wanted to truly figure that out. And so, like that same day, I bought a Bible on Amazon, and then I told my wife, like, let's find a church. And that's when we found Crossland. And I was like, I just want to know who this guy is. And as I started learning about Jesus, and then just like leaning into my faith more and like accepting Jesus's love, what I learned to realize is now I understand why everybody says to put Jesus first. Because when you can put Jesus first, and when you can express, if you can be the person that he wants you to be first, then you're going to be a better husband. You're going to be a better wife. You're going to be a better runner. You're going to be a better employee. I'm like, okay, now I get it. Because when I'm living Christ-like and how he wants you to live, then I'm just a better person overall.
Right.
And so you shouldn't feel bad or, like worry about people being like, oh, she just says like, Jesus for everything, because that's what fuels you. Like, that's what makes you be a good runner. That's what makes you be a good fiance, makes you be a good human, and feel open about spreading his message. And so I think that's so powerful that you say that, because I've recently experienced that. And before that, I would be like, well, I don't know. I think I'm going to put my wife and my daughter before I'm going to put anybody. But if you put Jesus first, and you understand the reasoning for living the way that he wants you to live, then you're like, okay, when I do this first, then I'm the best husband that I can be, and I'm the best father that I can be. And that just translates to every other area of my life.
Right. That's so good. When Ryan proposed, like, I knew Ryan was the one because he loves Jesus more than me. And when you have Christ as the foundation, you know that like your identity is placed in that and not in your fiance or your success in a race. I mean, like, if I were to place my identity in how I performed, if I accomplished the goal, if I ran X amount of miles, blah, 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 like I would be crushed, or it would be fleeting and temporary. And I would be on this temporary high. And then I'd be like, okay, well, what else? What else? What else? But the beautiful thing about the Lord is that like he is constant and he is there. And so my success is not defined by the world. My success is defined by Jesus Christ. So whether I ran 2 miles or 100 miles, I'm still proud. I'm still I still have that success because my success is found in Jesus and defined by Jesus, and not by the stats of my run or what I do or the works that I accomplish or fill in the blank. or even like how I am as a future wife. It's something I talked with Ryan about on our podcast last week, was like, what if I'm not enough?
Mm-hmm.
What if I'm not enough for you? What if I can't be good enough and give you what you give me? And he said, are you supposed to be my God? And I was like,
wake up
call. That is so right in so many ways. But that's the beautiful thing, is that his foundation is based on Jesus Christ. And so he was able to give me that scripture-driven advice. And it's just beautiful. It's beautiful to learn and grow, and I'm still learning. I don't have everything figured out. You don't have everything figured out, but open conversations like this too bring glory and honor to the kingdom. And, you know, even if you don't have all the answers, like, we're talking about it.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, we're human, right?
Yeah.
Like that's one thing that God gave us, was free will. So we got to figure it out as we go. And I think that's what's so special about human interaction, especially as Christians, is like, okay, your perspective is way different than my perspective is. And one thing that was really cool about this year's Hot Rod Ultra was last year. So Abby won the 24-hour overall event this year. Last year, our winner was Mark Joe. Mark is from St. Louis, or he lives in St. Louis. He owns a coffee shop there. He worked for First Form for a long time, and he came back this year. And he has a big social following, just a great personal brand. And we were like, hey, we want you to come back. He loved the race. He came back, and he called it quits at like mile. I don't even know what mile it was. I want to say 30-ish, but something around that. It was before the 50-mile mark for sure.
Yeah, I remember seeing him leave.
Yeah, and he came up to Kevin and I, and he was like, hey guys, like it's not my day. It is what it is. And we were like, dude, no worries. And he hands us this little, and I'm pretty sure it was made out of like pennies, like a coin. And it was basically like a stamped, like they taken a penny and they had basically outlined a cross and then cut it out. So it was a little cross. I mean, really small. And he was like, I carry these with me, and I hand these to people who I'm praying about and organizations that I'm praying about.
Wow.
And so he handed one to Kevin and I each. And he was like, I'm praying for you guys and for Curbside. Like, what you guys are doing is awesome. And I'm like, the guy who came last year and won, he set this big goal this year to run X amount of miles. I mean, over 100 miles by far, to just call it quits, less than halfway into this race, and then be able to put his ego aside and come up to us and say, hey, sorry, it's not my day, but I'm praying for you guys all the time. I'm thinking about you guys. Like, that is big.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, being able to be that selfless and like leave your ego at the door is so awesome. But at the same time, I understand that, because running is so humbling. Like, it is so, so humbling. And I saw this quote one time. It was, roughly it was, if you want to have a spiritual experience, run a marathon. If you want to talk to God, run an ultra marathon. And it's so cheesy and cliche, but it's so true. I mean, I think that was really the kickstart of like my true spiritual journey, was when I ran my 100-mile race last April. I got to like mile 60 and I just started bawling, crying. I'm like, what is going on? And at that point in the race, I was like, I have 40 more miles to run. But at the same time, I love my wife. We're about to have a family, like start our family together. I love my job. And I'm like, I feel like God is talking to me right now. And so it's so crazy when you physically and mentally put yourself through the ringer. You reap so many benefits from that. And I think one of the benefits you get, not to make it sound so extreme, but if you want to talk to God, run 100 miles. But at the same time, when you put yourself in such a tough situation like that, you get to a point where you are just so like emotional. Like, did you experience that at any point during the race?
Yeah. So around mile 70, I would say, I have no idea what time it was, but maybe 70, 75. I hit a wall, like a pretty bad wall. And I was like swinging my arms, like power walking, like trying to just move as fast and forward as I could. But my legs were just giving out. And at that point, I had kind of struggled around mile 50, 55. I was struggling to get food down. So I knew that was the reason why I was crashing. I just couldn't keep food down. It was making me super nauseous. And I was trying my hardest, but at the end of the day, like, your body's going to do what your body's going to do. And so I was just walking, and Ryan, my fiance, he was on a team. And so it wasn't his turn to run. And so I was like, hey, I'm really struggling. And he was like, come on, we're not stopping. Let's go. And he grabs my hand and he walks with me and he's like pushing my pace and, trying to get me to walk faster. And I'm just holding his hand, like waffling, not even pancaking. Like I had to like grip his hand. And he walked with me for maybe like 5 miles. Like I walked for a while and he didn't have to do those miles. Like this is when he was supposed to be resting, but he, as the selfless, wonderful fiance that he is, well, boyfriend at the time, was like, no, I'm going to walk alongside you in your struggle and we're going to get through this together. And then I somehow was able to stomach some food and got a second wind and was like, and just like went for it. And I could not have run the race that I did without him there. He was encouraging and got me water, got me Advil, was, praying for me, praying with me, just speaking things over me that, when I was crying and just like, I don't know how much more I can go. Like he was speaking truth of like, you're strong, you're capable, you can do so much more than you think you can. And it's just beautiful to have people in your corner like that. I mean, our whole church family was there and that was like kind of our team. We all kind of just stuck together. And I mean, every time I would stop or come get water or pass, hey, you need anything? You need water? You need food? Like, how are you? And so I knew at any moment if I ever had another breakdown again, I could go to any one of those people. The atmosphere was just so inviting, and to be able to rely on strangers, to be able to rely on people I've known forever, to be able to rely on the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with on those emotional moments was everything. Was everything.
Yeah. And I think it's so easy to I'm sure a lot of people, when they talk to you about the race, you get comments a lot of times. It was like, you crushed it. Like, oh my gosh. But it's like, if you only knew, there are some dark moments when you're out there running, especially when nighttime hits. It just gets so lonesome. Even though you have other people with you that are doing the same thing, it's so hard to not feel sorry for yourself, right? Like it can get so draining, and especially on a loop that's 0.3 miles. I mean, if you all think about it, a mile is technically 3 laps on this course is just under a mile. And so to run a mile, you have to do it just over 3 times. So to see the same thing every, let's just say 5 to 7 minutes, it's hard, right? Mentally, that's where it mentally gets challenging. And so having those people to lean on, but then also being able to look back and be like, that was really hard. And I don't know how I pushed through it, but I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah.
Like there are so many lessons you can take from running, and it's applicable to your life. And I know one thing I realized, we haven't done like an intro for Abby, so we'll do that here in a second. But one thing that I found after all of my races is like the next couple of days or like the week after your race is everything seem easy to you. It's like, I just ran 100 miles. Like this is nothing.
Okay. Honestly, I'm going to be so real with you. Even like the moments after the race and during the race, I don't know what it was, but I felt like I ran that loop once. And I don't know if it's because I just checked out. I was listening to Broadway show tunes the entire time. So like I felt like I was constantly watching movies. So maybe that's a little tactic of just to get your brain literally on a different planet. I don't know what it was, but I didn't feel like I was running the same thing over and over again. Now, if I were to go back next year, things might be different because now I know what to expect. So it could have been the point that I didn't know what to expect. But regardless of what it was, everything felt, I don't know if easier is the word, but maybe just more relaxed, I guess. I don't know. Like those days after, I don't really know if I can put an exact word on it, but the days after, I was just like extremely grateful and also like, what just happened? I think I had a rush of emotions all at once that they kind of just blended together. I also think that I almost felt like it was a fever dream because I woke up and literally was at the beach. And so I was like, wait, did that just happen? Like my body is so sore, but I don't even remember any of that. But I think the thing is, I got a little too big for my britches because I work at the church, and I was
Oh,
like,
I know where this is going. Oh
I
yeah.
was like, oh, I'll be able to work after. Like, it'll be fine. Like, everything will be fine. So we finished the race at what, 8 o'clock?
Yeah. So the race goes from Saturday at 8 a.m. to Sunday at 8 a.m.
Yeah. And so I had just finished, and I was on a high, obviously,
Mhm.
and really wasn't feeling that tired, but didn't really realize I hadn't eaten since mile 90.
Oh
So that's
gosh.
about 16 extra miles of no food.
Mhm.
And it took a long time to do those 16 extra miles. So it was just a long time
Mhm.
of not eating. But again, like adrenaline and everything. And so I was like, okay, time to go to church. And I threw on a dress over my sweaty clothes, which at that point it was like dried sweat because
Yeah.
it was cold. Sprayed some perfume on, and then drove to church to work.
Struggle bus or
And
what?
I don't know. I really struggled with pride in that moment because I was like, I can do it. I can do this. Like, let's go. Let's be the best Christian you can be. Like, you just ran for a ministry and now you're going to go work at the church and serve the Lord. But the Lord also calls us to rest.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to focus on that. And so I showed up and I was not okay. And I
Mhm.
sat down and I was like, whoa. And everyone was like, go home, go home. And I was like, no, no, no. Like, I want to be here. I want to be here. My legs were swollen, had runner's rash. I could barely walk. I was doing my church, myself, a disservice,
Mhm.
but I couldn't set my pride aside and be like, I need to rest.
Mhm.
And so finally I was like, I need to go home.
Yeah.
And it just something clicked, and yeah, and they were like, please
Yeah.
go. And
Yeah.
I thought I was letting people down. Like, I told them I was going to work. And that's the thing about, your community is so important because everyone was like, do what's best for you. Go
Mhm.
home and sleep. And so if I could go back and change anything about it, it would be that, to be
Go home and
like,
sleep.
Abby, allow yourself to rest now because you just ran for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Like, set your pride aside. You're not a machine. You're not a robot.
Mhm.
Humble yourself. Give your body what it needs. So I don't know if that really answered the question, but that was
Yeah.
kind of like the mentality behind everything
Yeah.
after.
Well, I mean, it's when you get done with stuff like that, that's exactly what happened is you're like, I'm gonna go to church. I'm okay. Like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna go and interact and all this. And then people are looking at you like, hey, you can go home and rest. But your perspective is so changed because you just did something really hard. You're like, I promise, guys, being here is not that hard because I just ran for 24 hours straight,
Exactly.
But I think it's having that, like you said, like kind of having the mindset of like, okay, I can also rest. Like, that's not a big deal. So yeah, that's how I always am after races. Like, I
Mhm.
always feel like I bite off more than I should chew after a race because I'm like, I'm okay to go grocery shopping today. I just ran 100 miles. You don't think I can grocery shop?
Yes. And it's so interesting because when you're like in the middle of that like peak training block, you're like, oh, I am so excited to rest and I
Mhm.
am going to savor that like however long time after the race. And I'm just going to do nothing and blah, 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 blah. And then you do the race and then you're like, okay, what's next? What's next?
Don't want
What's
to sit
next?
still.
It's like the
Yeah.
grass is always greener. We're human. We always want the next thing.
Mhm.
And at some point, I have to be like, Abby,
Yeah.
stop. And I have a huge past with overexercise, disordered eating, like
Mhm.
all of it. And I'm very open about it, but that's something where I have to be like, don't let yourself go down that hole again. It's you constantly have to check in with yourself on that. And some people believe in like you're always recovering. Some people believe in like you are recovered and you're not. I don't know where I stand on it. It changes all the time, but something I do know is that I have to stay on myself of, okay, you can't get obsessive about this because then
Mhm.
you're making that your idol. And then that's your foundation. And then you sit here and talk about Jesus. Jesus is Lord. Jesus is everything. But are your actions showing that?
Right.
So I just have to constantly, check in with myself on that.
Yeah, and I mean, I had an eating disorder too. After
Oh,
I was
really?
I was a cheerleader in college, and I was a bigger guy and lost a bunch of weight like my senior year. And after that, I started getting into running.
Yeah.
And not long after, I developed an eating disorder, and I'm very open about it too. And it is one of those things I struggled with for like 3 or 4, almost 4 years.
Wow.
And it's the same thing with me. I'm like, I realized that I like to have control so much of in terms of my actions in my life,
Mm.
but I know that's not realistic. And so I have to be very, real with myself often and realize that that part of me is still there,
Mm.
that part of me. But I know that if I let it slip too much or if I try to like go heavy or really try to gain this control back or be really strict in certain areas of my life, I know where that can lead because I've been there before. And so I'm the same way. It's like I don't ever want to lose exercise, especially running. And so I know that in order to do that, I've got to have that balance and the mental capacity to know, okay, you're starting to veer off.
Right.
And understand that. And I don't ever want it to get back to that point again where and one thing that I've always said about eating disorders, specifically from my experience, I'll say, is you have control until you don't, because the whole point of it essentially comes down to control, right? Like you do this action of whether it's disorder eating disorder, over exercising, you do that to have control, whether it's you want to look a certain way, feel a certain way, whatever it is. But you do that for so long, it gets to a point where you don't have control anymore. And then it feels like, oh, I was just in the driver's seat. Now I'm in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
Like what the heck just happened?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I know that's very common when it comes to athletes. It's obviously not talked about all the time. So being able to talk about it and understand it is going to help other people, but it's going to also help you digest it a little bit better too.
Yeah.
Like when
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was gonna say whenever I talk about it, I'm like, okay, I understand why I feel this way, and I'm able to get through it a little bit better.
I was gonna say, I think it's very easy for us to, it's an addicting thing, and exercising specifically, but you can apply this to anything. Like for so long, I compared it to like being addicting like a drug, or being addicted to, whatever your thing is that are deemed like, very addictive things. But I think the hard part is, especially in today's world, like, but exercising is good for you, but eating healthy is good for you. Like drugs, they're bad. Alcohol, it's bad. So no, you don't want to do that, but exercising is good. But when you go overboard on it, it's so easy to be like, no, but it's good, but it's good. And it controls you, but in some twisted way, especially in, diet culture and hustle culture and all of this, there's a very, very fine line of like, is this too much? Is this, am I just really driven, or am I addicted?
Right.
And if my day, I can't fit in exercising, or if I'm going to a birthday party and want a piece of cake, like, am I going to let myself do that? And that's something I'm really passionate about, is like, you can be driven and have these crazy, awesome goals and also be human. And the world moves and things happen. And again, it goes back to like, what is your foundation? Because if my foundation is based off of what my body looks like or how I perform, that's going to get real addicting real fast. And then I'm going to lose who I am. And before I know it, I'm going to be terrified of a slice of bread. Like I've been there. I've had those days where like my mom has to be like, eat this banana, and I throw a hissy fit. But that's the other beautiful part of it, is like, when we can't control our minds, we've got to have people in our corner.
Yeah.
Because if I'm so occupied here and can't get out of how these cycles form in my brain, like, who's going to be able to pour into me? Who's going to be able to say, hey, I love you so much that I'm going to tell you the uncomfortable things.
Yeah.
I love you so much that I'm not going to let you fall. And yeah, it'll probably make you mad, but I love you so much, I'm going to tell you that anyways. And I feel like that kind of goes back to the question of like, why is the Lord putting me through this? Or why is the Lord allowing this to happen? Like, the Lord doesn't send bad things, but he uses them. So when I was in the deep depths of my eating disorder, like, I was like, God, why are you doing this? Like, I hate this. This is awful. Like, pity me, which is not a great mindset to have, but also you're overcome by all of these evil thoughts about yourself. And looking back now, I wouldn't have traded that for the world. But that little 13-year-old girl, she couldn't see past that. And so she had people to be like, hey, I'm going to sit with you and take a bite with you. I'm going to sit with you and read that book with you because you can't go on your run right now. Yeah, that was a really long tangent, but I get really, really passionate about this topic.
Yeah, well, I think, everybody's perspective is different on life. And I think that's why you said that God, he uses these things like our trials that we go through, because he knows that you can use it in a way that is going to impact other people, right? And you may not realize that it's impacting them in a way that may pull them closer to him, And so that was the same thing for me. I'm like, guys, don't guys don't have eating disorders. Like, what the heck is happening right
Man,
now?
one of my
It's
that just gets me
crazy.
fired up because
Yeah.
it's not talked about at all.
Right. Yeah. And so when I was going through it, I mean, it was hard. I mean, it's hard
Yeah.
for everybody relatively, right? But, afterwards when I finally, broke down and like told somebody, I'm like, okay, I know this isn't normal. Like, I know this is, I always like gave context or told people before I would explain, like, I know it's not normal for guys, and I'm like, okay, that doesn't matter. Like, the
Mm,
fact of the matter is that I'm going through this right now and I need help
mm,
and I don't want to do this anymore.
mm.
And then you get to a point where it sounds, I mean, very similar in this. You get to a point where you're like, okay, now I want to help other people or I want to share my story so that other people can understand, like, hey, it happens to everybody, regardless of what you look like, how tall you are, how much you weigh, like color of your skin, gender, all that. Like, it happens to everybody.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just like any disease or disorder. Like, it doesn't discriminate, right? Like, it
Right.
happens to any and everybody. So I
Mm.
think that was really hard for me to get through. Was like, okay, can a guy have an eating disorder and still tell people about it? So I
Wow.
think it was hard for me in the beginning. And then going to the exercise thing, it's like, I don't want to give up exercise, but I think especially what I found was in eating disorder recovery is it's a lot of times it can be very shameful towards exercising. And I'm like, okay, that's not me. Like, I want to work out no matter what it looks like, whether it's just lifting weights, running, walking, whatever. And I'm like, that's not me. So then you start realizing not everything has to be storybook. Like, when you recover from something or when you go through something, it doesn't have to look like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. I'm still going to work out after I go through this. And I can show people, like, hey, you don't have to give up everything after you go through something that surrounds your body image or exercise or whatever it is. Like, you can still work out and do things, but it's all about finding the balance and using the resources around you to be able to do it again. Right.
Man, that's so good. I have this conversation with Ryan a lot, but wow, Ryan's just getting all the shout
He's a
outs
good dude,
today.
man. We got to bring Ron back on.
Yeah,
So
seriously. Shout out Ryan. Love him
yeah.
so much. But something he told me, which I still have, like food guilt. I'll be
Yeah.
like,
Oh yeah.
oh, I
Yeah.
overate and now I feel really bad. And, he's really good at speaking truth into me. And he looked at me and he was like, and my mom has also said this as well. So I know the Lord is telling me something.
Yeah.
But they're like, when you get to heaven, like, God's not going to be like, you had a great body. Like, good job for not skipping a day at the gym this week.
Right.
Oh my goodness. It was so awesome when you didn't eat that ice cream,
Yeah.
It's like, no, he's going to be like, oh, faithful servant. Like, thank you for bonding with your youth group at the Mexican restaurant, or thank you for having that run club that brought people together, or thank you for going and sitting and praying in silence alone away from your phone. Those are the things that, propel us to spread the gospel and to do those things. And yeah, so I just kind of have to like zoom out and be like, what's the goal here?
Yeah.
Just make it simple. It's it's not that deep, honestly. I just have to continue to tell myself that when I get so zoned in on like the one bad day, or oh, my stomach hurts, I shouldn't have eaten that, or it's like, Satan, you don't have that hold on me anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not that same girl. I'm not that 13-year-old girl. So stop viewing me as that, because I'm strong in the Lord. I'm righteous in the Lord. And you wouldn't come after me unless I was strong.
Right.
Because Satan doesn't want a weak person on his army. So for the listener, like, if you're feeling really beat down by evil right now, know it's because you are strong in the Lord. And that's my encouragement for anyone going through that tough time, because it's hard, but you got two people right here who have been there, and it'll strengthen you. And
yeah, it definitely does. And one thing that Pastor Greg at the church that Abby and I go to talked about a couple weeks ago was he kind of used the very similar example we were just talking about. Is he says that he doesn't work out to necessarily look better and take care of himself, but he does it because he wants to make the most of the minutes he's been ordained by God. And he said the same thing, and similar to what Chad Wright said at the Hot Rod Ultra kickoff event, was he had everybody Google a picture of a skull. He was like, that's what we all look like whenever we die, when we're buried or whatever it is. That's how we all look. So when you go to heaven and when you get there, like pretty much what you just said, like God doesn't care how you look. He cares about the things that you did and how you use the time he ordained for you and how you accepted his love. He doesn't care about how you looked. He doesn't care about good job going to the gym 5 days a week because it made you look better and healthier. He does it because he knows you did that action to make the most of the time you had here on earth.
Man,
and I think that like running races and things like this, it connects you with God more. And so to not feel guilty about doing things that's going to connect you with God, but don't do it for the reasons that it's for the aesthetics or the fleeting things, right? Like that's not going to get you any extra brownie points on God's checklist. Right. But making the most of the time that he's ordained to you, that's what's gonna make him happiest.
Yeah. And I mean, like, he created us. I am fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God. And I think there's beauty in wanting to, you know, look good. Like, you don't want to like seek approval from others, but I also like, I want to be fit.
Yeah.
You know, to be able to do X, Y, Z things. But I think the thing is, like, our body is a temple and we want to take care of it. So it's not, you know, how we look or how we whatever, but like, how are we treating ourselves? Like, are we honoring the temple? Are we putting good food into our body to nourish us? Are we taking care with our body in the way that the Lord has blessed us to be able to take care of that? And each body's different and every body is different. There's no like benchmark of like,
there's no standard of
like the Lord hasn't said like, okay, this is what you need to do, you know. But I just think it's beautiful. And I also think like there are so many blessings for so many different people. Follow where that is led. And for us, like, it's more heavily emphasized on the fitness things, but for other people it might be something different. So
yeah well, that's awesome. Well, Abby, we're 40 minutes in and we haven't entered. I haven't even given you the opportunity to say who is Abby Murphy. So why don't you do that for us real quick? Just give us a little brief. Who is Abby? Because I think people are probably already figuring out who you are, what your values are, and how awesome you are. But just for the people listening, if they haven't ever met you before or heard you talk, give us an intro.
Wow. Who is Abby? What a question. I'm still figuring that out. I'm always figuring that out. For specifics, I'm 22 years old. I'm a senior at college. I still love theater, but from the age of 9 to 21, I was theater girl. I'm going to be on Broadway. That's my goal. I've always loved athletics. I've always, you know, from when I hit the age limit to be able to go to the gym, like I was in there lifting. I've always loved it, but now I'm like full on running. I love training. I love doing all of it. And about April, I would say, I started taking my podcast really seriously. So I started my podcast myself my freshman year of college. And then around April of 2024, I asked my boyfriend at the time, Ryan, fiance now, if he'd want to do, you know, co-hosting with me, and we do a whole rebrand thing. And so now we're here today, and we have That's Life Poddy is our Instagram name, I guess, but That's Life Podcast is the podcast. And faith, fitness focused. That occupies a majority of my days. I work at the church and I love it. I work in kids ministry. It's the best thing ever. And those kids are just so sweet and I love them. But I feel like that's pretty much it. And I just run races.
Yeah.
Which is
win
fun.
races. You win races. That's what you do. You win the Hot Rod Ultra.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's talk about the podcast though, kind of shifting gear a little bit. So because I remember listening to the podcast before you guys rebranded and I don't remember the name of it. So talk about what it looked like when it was born and kind of how it's evolved.
Well, the name is still the same. So I say rebrand, but mostly just because I went from Host and Abby being the brand to Abby and Ryan being the faces.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's always been That's Life.
Okay.
Which I feel like there's kind of beauty in that because that's the whole point is like life changes. Like that's the point of the podcast is, you know, I'm going to come on the podcast and talk about life as it is happening rather than after I go through it. That was kind of like my big goal in, the motivation behind it and just being like, I don't have everything figured out, but you don't have to have everything figured out in order to be able to talk about it. That's the beauty of learning and growing. And I feel like so often people are like, well, I can't talk about Jesus because I don't know enough yet. I can't talk about the Bible because I don't know enough yet. But the reality of the fact is we're never going to know enough. There's never going to be a point where we know enough where Jesus is like, oh, okay, now you have hit your max knowledge that you need to know. Like, now you can get into heaven because you know all you need to know. Like, we're not built for that. We're not wired for that. Like, I know I'm going to heaven because I know Jesus Christ is Lord. That's all I need to know. The rest, he's going to help me navigate that. And that's the heart and soul behind the podcast, is just talking open about life, talking about the hardships. Sometimes it's a funny podcast and we talk about wedding plans. Sometimes it's really deep because I'm an emotional, moody girl in her 20s. And, it's different all the time, but it's lifestyle, food, faith, fitness. And sometimes we'll even answer some questions from people and just get totally off topic. Sometimes we'll talk about our favorite cookie flavor, and sometimes we'll talk about the best piece of dating advice. You never know what you're going to get, but that's what to expect when you listen to a podcast episode.
I know you guys are big Crumbl folks. I always see you all on your Instagram.
It's so funny because, okay, this is like, not a lot of people know this. I only tell, our close circle, but I feel like at this point, people just need to know, because there's no way we're going to get a partnership with Crumbl at this point. But we started those because, we want to grow, as any creators do. They want to grow. And we were like, what's going to be something good that a lot of people will be interested in? It can also be fun and show, you could be focused on your health and also have balance and like eat a cookie. So that's where the Crumbl reviews started. And it's just something we could look forward to.
Yeah.
It's fun. Like, we like to see what they taste like, give our opinions. But I, at the time, did not like Crumbl cookies.
Really?
They were too sweet for me. I like to think I'm a pretty healthy eater. But we've been doing them for so long now that I actually really like them. The taste is like kind of grown on me, but they hurt my stomach so bad. And so I always get a comment that's like, she takes the smallest bites. She doesn't even eat it. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. You know why? Because if not, I'm going to be on the toilet for like an hour after this. And so I think it's just funny, like the little behind the scenes of it all. But at this point, we're so deep into these reviews.
Oh yeah.
We're going to keep it up. And it's also just fun. We look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, you kind of get to a point when what I found with a lot of creators and like influencers is like, you get to a point where something is kind of your thing.
Yeah.
And so now it's like on Mondays, you guys do Crumbl cookie reviews, right? Like, people love that stuff. And it's funny, the last 2 weeks, I haven't gone on Monday each time, but it was like Tuesday of the week prior to this week. I like saw you all post about it. I was like, we haven't been to Crumbl in forever. I was like, I'm gonna go get some Crumbl. So
what did you get? Which
flavors? It was last week's. I don't remember last week's. It was like the banana one. We didn't get that one though. I was like, but this week it was like the pink velvet cookie.
Yeah.
The sticky cookie or stick whatever.
That one was surprisingly good.
That was really good. I was like, it was like filled. I was like, I don't know about it.
Ugly.
And then the milkshake one was pretty solid too.
Oh yeah, I love that one.
And then the like the Kentucky butter cake. Is that what it is?
Okay, so you got the whole menu unlocked. Good for you.
We got it all. So yeah, if you guys are looking for sponsorship, Crumbl, Abby's your girl over here.
She's a Crumbl lover.
Yeah. So but anyway, yeah, that's so cool. I love like seeing, especially, we're young people. Like, it's so cool to see you lean on those things and just like be yourself and not be afraid to share it, right? Like being open about your faith and being open about like the struggles with running and disordered eating and all those things. I think it's so important, because a lot of times people like to have a look on social media and it's scary as crap a lot of times. Like, I don't know if I want to share this. Like, I don't want random strangers to know this about me, but I think that what I found is the more open you are about yourself and sharing your story, the less you care about. Like, people know this about me. Like, I don't really care. Like, now it allows me to be more authentic and just share my story and not have to think twice about it or take 15 takes to record a video. Like, even the little things like that, like your confidence just builds. Have you seen that effect, or was it a struggle in the beginning when you first started like sharing your story on social?
Yeah, I've definitely grown in being able to, talk about things that are really personal to me. I think I've always been someone who just overshares anyways, especially especially growing up in theater. It's always been a little bit easier for me to just be able to speak out how I feel, because I was speaking on a stage for a long time. And, as a 9-year-old in the spotlight, literally in the spotlight, like it's a very vulnerable thing. And so I kind of just got used to it, I guess, which really helps when wanting to share things. But I think also once I like overcame my first, I guess, round of eating disorder, I don't know, like I went through different phases of it. I don't really know what to call it. But the first time I kind of went through that phase, I realized like, what's the point of going through this and keeping it to myself? Mm-hmm. And I think from there, I just became really passionate about sharing everything. And for a while, it wasn't as much being scared to like be vulnerable. It was more so the comparison thing that got to me, because I have these people that I look up to. I look up to a Janine Amapola or a Sadie Robertson or these Christian female speakers that I love. There are so many men and women both that I look up to, but I was like, oh, I'm not as good at this as they are, or they're better at this, and blah, 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 blah. And about, I don't know, a couple months ago when we were starting to grow, I was on a run and I just felt so heavily like the Lord, not audible words, but like I really feel the Lord through my gut. And I was just like running, and he was just like, you're not supposed to be like them. You're supposed to be different. Like, that's okay. And I've always, compared myself in the way of like, maybe I'm not saying as much scripture as I need to, or maybe I'm not saying, talking about Jesus as much as I need to, like professionally. It doesn't sound as good. It doesn't blah, 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 blah. I'm talking too much about myself. Like, I'm sharing too much of my stories. And the Lord was just kind of like, but that's what I want you to do.
Right.
You don't have to look all polished. We've already got some polished people and they're great at what they do. Now you come on and be unpolished because we need someone there. And again, it's life. It'll change. Maybe I'll learn more and navigate and change and this and that and whatever. But when I stopped comparing myself and was like, this is what I'm able to offer right now, that's when everything changed, really.
Yeah. And I think, that's a never ending cycle, right? I mean, as you grow and your vision of something changes, so does the critic in you, right? Like, it's like, well, I'm trying something new. Well, I like the way that this person does this person does that. And that's okay to have inspiration off of somebody. But I do think it's important for people to understand that when you think about somebody you like watching on social media, you like watching them because they're different than other people, because they're not like other people. Well, it's like, don't you ever think maybe that's why people enjoy listening to you speak or listening to your story?
That's good.
Is because you have a different perspective as well. And so just because you can't replicate something that somebody else does isn't a bad thing. That's a good thing, because your journey is different, and the vision that God has for you, the purposes that God has for you is different than Sadie Robertson or somebody else, right? So I think it's important to have that perspective, and it's really hard to do. I mean, it's really hard to think that way when you're in a creative block, or when you're trying to think of like content you want to put out that week, or you don't like the way you looked on the video or the way you spoke, or haven't talked about Jesus enough. Like, all that stuff doesn't matter, because God knows who you are and you know who you are. And you really know when you put something out there, you're like, that felt good.
Yeah.
That felt really good. And it didn't feel forced. And whether it gets 10 likes or it gets 10,000 likes, it's like, that felt good. Like, that felt good to put out, and I'm happy with it. And that's it. Wipe my hands. I'm done for the day. But again, I understand that it's hard to feel that way. But I think from a perspective of somebody who consumes content, I'm like, I like so-and-so because their perspective is different than somebody else. So their values are different, and they're not afraid to speak it. So I think that you have to change your mindset if you're somebody that wants to get into content creation or social media, or just trying something new, whether it's podcast or something totally different. Is like, when you think of the things you consume, you do that because that person inspires you, or they're different in some way. Well, you have to look at it as, okay, I'm going to do this, and maybe I'll bring that different perspective to somebody else, and they'll like it because it gives them what that gave to me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So
yeah,
I think that it's important to look at it that way. And it's challenging. Like, content's always changing, the algorithm's always changing, social media is always changing. But that's what I like so much about doing podcast stuff, is it's conversation, and you can always talk about whatever is relevant at the time or whatever you're feeling, and it's constantly updating.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it's so cool that with you and Ryan doing it now, like it brings two totally different perspectives, and so you can bounce things off of each other, right? Like it's like having a guest on a podcast. It's like it's such candid conversation that it's gonna probably reach two different types of people that are listening to it.
Yeah.
So I think it's so powerful to think that way.
Yeah, it's so fun.
Yeah. But to go off on my tangent there now. But the other thing I want to talk about is, when I started this podcast, so our podcast was initially called the Move Well Podcast. Now it's Adapt and Achieve. And when I rebranded it, I wanted to have like a different name of it because I wanted to have a totally different look of the podcast. But also I'm like, what can I change it to that is going to hold meaning? And so when I came up with Adapt and Achieve, I'm like, well, that in some way means something to every human because they've gone through adversity, and regardless of how big or small it was relative to them, they were able to overcome it and use it for something in their life. So I'm going to kind of put you on the spot, but what is a challenging time that you've had in your life, or maybe something difficult that you've gone through, whether it was mentally, physically, whatever it was, and how did you adapt to that? How did you overcome it? And how did you essentially use it to better yourself or take away something in your life? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've got an answer for you.
Okay. Let me hear it.
This last year was the hardest year of my life I've ever been through. Maybe because it's the most recent, so I just remember the hurt the most. But yeah, so I'm a senior now. It's my junior year. And it was tough. So for some context, my sophomore year of college, I left a little bit early and I booked a professional show, and moved to Texas. Was going to stay there for at least 6 months, hopefully a year, kind of just picked up my life to perform in this show. And it was a really big opportunity. I was so excited about it. It was great. And I lost my faith-based community. I wasn't surrounded by a lot of believers. So it was hard to, be poured into. I got really lost. And I didn't necessarily like do anything that was quote unquote like against my morals, but I was losing my convictions to a point where like I couldn't hear my convictions as much because I wasn't, rooted in the word. But then from there, the show ended and I came home, and everything that I knew from sorry.
There's okay, real quick, I'm going to pause. Not to cut you off, Abby, but there is somebody literally right outside of our office blasting Don't Stop Believing by Journey. And I'm like,
so hard to stay focused.
I just had to text Kevin. I'm like, hey, can you see if somebody is like literally in our parking lot?
It's the remix version though.
Hold on to the feeling.
I'm so sorry. I was trying so hard not to address it, but I was like, this is jamming too much for me.
This is crazy.
Okay, wait, let me keep going.
Okay, so yeah, you're in Texas. Let's try this again.
I'm in Texas. And then the show gets canceled, just randomly. And so midsummer, I move home. And for the first time in my life, I don't have theater. I don't have school. I don't have anything. So I rested and I got a job as a lifeguard, super chill. And then I really got back in the word, and I kind of lost it for a month or two there. And I, was like, oh my gosh, Jesus, like I have been so distant from you. This is crazy. And then it was time to go back to school. And I went back to school and I went back in my theater world, and something felt not right. And everything was so fast paced and everything was not right. And I don't know how to explain it other than I was just not supposed to be doing theater anymore. And that's all I'd ever known since I was 9 years old. That's all I'd ever known I wanted to do. That's all I had to offer, as I thought, career wise. I mean, like when we introduce who we are, we say our name and then our job.
Right.
And so I was like, oh my gosh, what am I? Who am I? And that's when I realized what I was placing my identity in. And it took me so long to finally realize, stop putting yourself through this misery. Like the Lord is obviously calling you to go somewhere else and do something else. Like it was a difference it wasn't just, oh, this is hard and, it's not really fun right now. No, it was very obvious. You're not supposed to be doing this at all. But I didn't have another option. I didn't have another offer. And so that blind faith of just like jumping into something else was terrifying to me, that I stayed in it and was just like, no, this is my plan. This is what I have. This is what I have to offer. This is all I know. But I was so focused on my plan, my pride, that I couldn't have this dark hole that the Lord was like, hey, I'm going to be here to catch you. I couldn't jump in it because I couldn't see the end result until finally this summer. I was like, I'm not going back. I can't go back. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something. And that's when we just started posting. And so now it's, I love that, we're growing. It's great and it's awesome. But that year was so tough. I had so much anxiety. I had so much identity confusion of just like, what am I going to do? Who am I? And I was very humbled in the fact of like, you're idolizing your performance on the stage. So take the view off of yourself and put your gaze on the Lord. Because if you go to him first for everything, he has good plans. He knows the plans he has for you. Not Abby knows. God knows. And God already has it planned out. So it's up to Abby if she's going to put her trust in Jesus and not trust after he shows her the plan.
Right.
Trust before the plan happens, in the vulnerability, in the struggle, in the hard. And once that switch flipped, it was weird, trying to navigate like, okay, I really have no idea what I'm going to do. But to make that was a really long answer, but I mean, I'm sitting here now the happiest I've been in a while, and I'm not doing anything in theater. I'm running and I'm posting fun videos.
Yeah.
And I love it. And if the Lord calls me tomorrow to go be a firefighter, heck, I'll go do it.
Yeah.
But this is where I am right now, and growing in that blind faith is something that I've really learned over the last year.
Man, that is so powerful. And while you were saying that, I was just looking up, I posted an Instagram story last night, and it was the Instagram page is called like Trust God, Bro. And I love, they post so much good stuff. And they made a post, I shared it in my story, and it says, have faith in what you just prayed about. And that is so powerful, because that's blind faith, right? Like that's the whole point of faith, is like having the power to just believe in it.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. And I think that's why a lot of people aren't Christians, is because they're like, well, we don't know that for sure. It's like, well, that's faith. Like that's the whole point of faith, is to have faith in what you just prayed about, or have faith in God. And being able to do that is so hard. Like even now, like we're not going to sit here and say like, oh yeah, it's easy every single day to wake up and whatever. But it's so hard sometimes. But I think that is a strong trait to have, and a strong ability to have, because it's going to benefit you in so many areas of your life. And that kind of goes back to what you're saying about when you went to Texas and you made that move. I think and I said this on the last podcast with Julie Denton. She's one of the owners of Blue Cotton. I said, it's just as important to figure out what you don't want to do as it is to figure out what you do want to do in life, and just generally speaking. Right. And that is so true, because when you know how good it feels to just post content and be able to just like record podcasts and have fun. Like how good does that feel? But people don't idolize the idea of figuring out what you don't want to do, because that's hard, because maybe you had this expectation of, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be in theater and I'm going to do all this stuff. But then you get into it and you're like, I don't know though. Like maybe I don't want to do this.
Right.
But it's so hard to look at it the same way, in an exciting way, because you expected it to look differently. Right. So maybe just give like a glimpse of how I think it's hard for people maybe they want to believe in God, or they want to be a Christian. Like, how do you navigate faith? I know that's a very broad question, but how do you look at faith every day and be like, okay, it's really hard today, but here's how we're going to do it. Or today was really good, and here's how it looked.
Yeah. I think for me right now, I'm in a place in my faith of realizing it's a lot more practical than we think it is. I feel like for so long, I was like, I need the feeling of faith. I need to find this feeling, this motivation. But it's a lot of dedication. I mean, we can relate it and compare it a lot to training. Like, okay, say for example, I sign up for this race. Okay. I'm not just going to go run the race, not train a day in my life. I'm going to put in the work. I'm going to plan out the schedule. I'm going to show up even when I don't want to. I'm going to train the way I need to train. And I'm not going to burn myself out one day of the week and then not do anything for 5 more days and then just keep that up. I'm going to do little consistent things over time. And it's like, it's the same thing with your faith. Like, I'm not going to sit down and have a conversation with someone for the first time and be like, so tell me the meaning of life.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm going to be like, so what's your favorite color? What do you do? Start with the small things. It's the same thing with building a relationship with God. Like, if I only talk to him when I'm like, what do I do with my life? I'm not going to know how to hear him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to know what he sounds like. I'm not going to know how he speaks to me. But if I pray about everything, and, it doesn't have to be this whole get on your knees, weep, like literally just a little, I call them breath prayers. Like it sounds silly, but I started like asking the Lord what I should eat for lunch. I started praying before lifts and just being like, hey, like help this be a good one. Just the little things over time. Should I listen to this podcast or this podcast? Just the little things that built up over time to where it's like, oh, I know what the voice of the Lord sounds like now. And so when it's like, do I need to stay in school or do I need to transfer online? Which, looking back at it now seems small, but at the time was a career altering thing.
Right.
I knew what to seek and how to listen, and also knew it can also be different, but I have a close relationship with him. But it starts small, and like, you don't have to go out and read the King James Version Psalms 1 through 20 on day 1. Like, get the NIV, get the NLT, get something that you respond to, get a comic book Bible, get pictures, look up videos. Start somewhere that makes sense to you, and then over time you can ask for advice and get those things and XYZ amount. But I think the other thing too is like, prayer is a lot more powerful than we think. And we hear the prayers from pastors and from people that are like all these big eloquent words. At the end of the day, the Lord wants you for you as you are. You don't have to brush yourself up, clean yourself up to present a picture to him to then be able to talk to him. Like, a parent would rather have their child only come to them when they need help rather than the child not come to them at all because, oh, I haven't talked to them in forever. Like, at least that's how I would be as a mom. It's like, I want you no matter what. And that's how the Lord is. Like, even if I haven't talked to him for months and then I'm going through it, like, he still wants to hear from me. But I think the thing is, like, what if you just let yourself talk to him every day, even if you didn't know what to say?
Yeah.
And how could you grow in that? And who could you ask to help you? So we all start somewhere. And there's no benchmark to reach. So why not just start?
That is powerful right there. I love that. I'm literally writing that down. We all start somewhere. And I think obviously that's applicable to everywhere in life. But when it comes to faith, I mean, that's where I was less than a year ago. I mean, like I said, I knew that I believed in God, but I got to a point where I was like, I don't have a relationship with him. Like, I don't know who he is. And that's when I literally Googled, and this is the exact definition of starting somewhere. I Googled beginner Bibles, and it said New Living Translation, NLT, and that's the one that I purchased. I got one off Amazon that same day, and it's different for everybody, but especially if you're not familiar with language in the Bible, like something like the NLT is very easy to digest. I mean, it speaks to you as if we're conversing right now, and it was so powerful because you start reading, and then as you start reading, then you start thinking of questions. And then I come to work and I'm talking to Kevin's very open in his faith. I'm like, hey, like, what did you think about this? Like, what did you take from this? Like, what does this mean to you? And then it piques your interest in church. And so I think it's just like coming from somebody who a year ago had no, what's the word I'm looking for? No like benchmark of what faith looked like.
Yeah.
I had no clue what it could look like from a small scale or a large scale. Like, that's exactly what I did. Buy a Bible, start reading, start asking questions, whether it's Google or a person, and then find a church. Like, I think that is the most important thing to start with. And then that's one thing I struggled with was like prayer. I'm like, what do I say?
Yeah.
Like, what do I ask for? Is it bad to only ask for things? But you just laid it out perfectly where it's like, use an example from a parent. Like if you didn't talk to your child for a year and they came to you because they needed something, hey, at least they're talking to me.
Yeah,
At least
exactly.
they feel comfortable enough to come and talk to me.
Mhm.
And I think when you start doing that, then you start from the perspective of a child. God's our heavenly Father. When you start looking at it as the perspective of a child, it was like, he just wants to have a relationship with me. He
Right.
just wants me to accept his love. And then you're like, okay, I want to ask for things. Like I need help and I need support in these areas. But also I want to say, hey, thanks, because I see what you're doing.
Yeah.
I asked for help in this area of my life. And I asked for you to help me with this struggle that I'm going through. And I see it and I'm benefiting from it. So, hey, thanks. And I think
Yeah.
it's powerful, and everybody's faith journey looks different. But I think to have that perspective, like you just laid out, is so powerful.
Well, and like when you were talking with Kevin about, asking those questions, I think from the receiving end, there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you're less of a Christian. That doesn't mean you're taking a step away from Jesus. Like, if you don't know, great. Now you have something to look for in the Bible. Now you have a little bit of guidance on where to go. And I think that sometimes, I've fallen victim of this so much, of basing our relationship with Jesus on a feeling. And in one of my favorite songs, like the line is, my faith isn't feelings. It's because feelings are fleeting. And if we constantly search for that, like, oh, I want to read the Bible, we're not going to want to read the Bible every day. I don't want to read the Bible every day, just like I don't want to run every day, but I do it, because that is what builds that relationship. Like, I don't always want to give my mom a phone call every day to talk to her, but like, if I want to be close with her, that's what I need to do. And, it's the same thing. Like, the Lord doesn't promise us an easy life, but he promises us that he will bring us from death to life. The Christian walk isn't easy. Like, it's not. But the joy of the Lord surpasses any other joy that this world can give, that we just can't help but talk about how amazing Jesus is. Now, does that mean I'm never going to have a struggle again in my life? No, absolutely not. But that does mean that I have someone to go to that I know is eternal and fights for me and will fight with me and guide me through that struggle. And I think, when we focus on that truth rather than like seeking happiness, that's when everything will change. Like, when you get in your word and in your Bible and you start reading to learn about God rather than reading to learn about yourself. And I don't want people to hear that and be like, you can't learn things about yourself through the Bible. Obviously you can, but I'm not seeking myself when I'm reading the word. Right. I got to seek to learn about Jesus. I got to seek to learn about the Lord, because he's the ultimate creator. He's Lord Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. And he wants me. He wants a relationship with me, like the God that created the entire universe, that is literally going to come back at the end of times, like, wants me there with him. That is literally so powerful. And like, I didn't come up with that. Like, that's in the word.
Right.
So we can all read that. But yeah, it's finding what works for you, starting somewhere, establishing the roots, and then like invite someone to help you water the plant.
Yeah.
Like, ask people in. And even if they don't know everything, everyone knows something that you can talk about, even if everyone's like, I don't know. Let's take it to church. Let's go to someone who studied it. Let's take steps forward.
Yeah, man, that is so powerful, Abby. Man, that is, and that breaks it down to a point that it's always the idea of all this stuff. We understand. I think you can agree. Like, the idea of everything we're saying is easy, but being able to do it and implement it is challenging. So like hard. That's hard. Like, we totally understand that. And I'm very new in my faith in terms of like my active journey of faith. But yeah, it's like Abby said, like, she doesn't want to read the Bible every day. Like, she doesn't want to, like, there's a lot of days where I lay down at night and I'm like, oh, I didn't pray today. And it's like, don't feel guilty about it. Just like find ways to just speak to God throughout the day. Right. Yeah. So I think it's important for people to understand that too. Like, it's not as easy as waking up and flipping the light switch on every day. Like, it takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of intention for sure. Like, it's not an easy journey all the time. I think that when people first, from my experience, when I first was having this kind of spiritual awakening, it was like a honeymoon phase. Like, the first month I was like, I read my Bible every single night before bed, and I read through like the whole book of John, the whole book of Matthew, and like a day each, even with work and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And after about a month, it's like, okay, it doesn't feel that easy anymore. But if you want to have that, and knowing how powerful faith is now and how powerful the message is, I know that it takes a lot of intention. And I know that it's worth it. Right. So being able to understand that is going to make the journey a lot easier too, is knowing that everybody's human. We all have free will, which means we don't always want to pick it up every day and read the word,
Right.
So what advice would you give to somebody that maybe is kind of in that honeymoon phase and they're going through it of like, man, everything feels good right now. Like when they start to kind of, I don't lack of better words, like hit that wall.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to them?
Honestly, I mean, enjoy that honeymoon phase while you can. I feel like there are a lot of parallels that you can make with an earthly relationship and then a relationship with the Lord and your faith. Like, yeah, honeymoon phase. Like we go on honeymoons. Like I'm planning a honeymoon to go on after my wedding. Like, and it's going to be awesome. And then we're going to go back to work. And if I constantly seek that feeling, I'm never of being on that honeymoon. I'm never going to keep moving forward. And I think that's the thing of where I, am like, okay, this is when the practical part comes in. Like, oh, we run the race and it's awesome. And I'm on this high. I just finished a marathon. Like, yeah, let's do it again. Now you got to train.
Yeah.
And if we focus on the guilt that is not sent from the Lord of, oh, I missed a day, or, oh, I really, I had a fight with my husband today and we didn't fight at all on our honeymoon, or, oh, I missed reading the Bible. And, I'm jumping around to all these different examples, but apply it to what you want to apply it to, have it make sense to you. Like that's when it's putting in the reps. And one day that training session is going to be really hard. And one day you're going to leave feeling the most epic pump you've ever felt in your life. The walk with Jesus is not linear. But just as there will be lows, there will also be highs. And sometimes you won't feel anything. Sometimes you'll open your Bible and you'll read Psalm 23 and you'll be like, heard this one before, not feeling a certain way about it. Okay. Now I'm going to keep going. It's like, oh, I'm not telling myself, oh, I didn't have an emotional, spiritual awakening today. And we can't base our faith on these feelings. We've got to base them on God. That's the point of it. And we can learn just as much about ourselves through learning about Jesus too.
Oh yeah.
And there's never going to be a point. There's never going to be an end point. So just keep going.
Yeah.
Just turn the page each day. Just turn the page.
Yeah.
That's all.
It's powerful stuff, Abby. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, I know that people are dying to hear, but the music that we're hearing outside, I texted Kevin, it's coming from the police station across the street. So our office is by a police station, like right behind us. And I guess, I don't know if they're doing maybe some Halloween thing, I would assume,
maybe.
But they're like playing music through their police
funny.
Like speakers on their cars. So it's, for Abby and I, it's right in our ear. Like it sounds like somebody's parked right out here, doesn't it?
I kind of got used to it. I'm not gonna lie.
It's like 15 minutes ago, I'm like, okay, these jokers are not gonna stop. Yeah. I thought so our parking lot is like right on a main road here. So I was like, somebody must have pulled in and playing music, but no, it's
so
the
funny
Bowling Green Police Department. So shout out to you all. Love you guys. Thanks.
One of my friends is a police officer. I'll text him and I'll be like, hey, so y'all made an appearance on the podcast.
We heard you guys. I think the editing stuff I use will probably cancel it all out, but
that's good.
We did get to hear Journey for a couple minutes.
We did.
Don't Stop believing. Great song. Well, Abby, I think this is a good place to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming on today and just sharing your perspective. I think you're so impressive, especially for being a young person. I love it. So
thank you.
Before we do though, where can people find you and what you're up to?
Time for all the shameless plugs.
Here we go. Plug it in.
On all socials, TikTok, Instagram, you can find us at That's Life Poddy, Poddy. And then if you go on YouTube, it's Abby and Ryan. We post our podcast, which is That's Life Podcast on all streaming services. But we post the visuals for that on our YouTube channel as well as vlogs, all the things. If you're a clothes person and you like fashion, you can find us on LTK. That's like
nice.
little
Okay.
we link all of our clothes on there. I think that's
Ryan
pretty much
too.
Yeah,
Nice.
Ryan does too.
Okay, shout out to Ryan.
We got the fitness outfits and we have the more fashionable ones. I got like my church fits and then I got my running fits and my headphones, all the things, my watch. So if you need a link for anything,
nice.
find us on there. That's Life Potty. Yeah, I think that's where we are right now.
Pretty much it.
Yeah, pretty much it.
All right, cool. Well, again, thanks, Abby. It was an awesome conversation today. Congrats again on the engagement.
Thank you.
Congrats on winning the Hot Rod Ultra.
Thank you.
And we were just talking offline. We have Sally McRae coming next year to the
I'm
Hot
so
Rod
excited.
Ultra.
So I'm gonna fangirl.
Yeah,
so
if you all want to sign up for the 2025 Hot Rod Ultra, Sally McRae, her Instagram handle is Yellow Runner. She is an amazing human,
She's so
awesome
cool.
story, and just all around, just awesome, badass person. So
she's so cool.
Check out Sally, and if you guys are interested in hearing her speak next year, you can check out hotrodultra.com. That's where sign up is for the race, and if you sign up for the race, you get free entry to come and hear Sally speak. So it's going to be an awesome year next year.
So
Abby
awesome.
is going to come defend her title, hopefully.
Oh my gosh.
We'll
Well, I mean, I'll have to tell you
About a
closer
year
to
away.
time.
No,
I mean, I want to.
Oh, okay.
But like, if the Lord says, "Hey, you're gonna break your leg," then I'm gonna not. Have to train
God
for
willing,
it,
you might come.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
Sounds
say
good.
that. We'll say
You
that.
could be on a honeymoon somewhere by that point. We don't know what Abby's gonna be doing.
Who knows? We're going to Hawaii.
Oh, nice.
So
okay.
Maybe we can get some trail runs in there or something.
Beautiful scenes there.
Yeah,
at least.
I'm excited.
Cool. Well, all right, guys. Well, thanks for if you're watching on YouTube, thank you all for tuning in. If you're listening on audio, thank you as well, and we will catch you next time.